Hello, everybody. Well, this is the third in the series of encouraging you to do something videos. This one is encouraging you to even just consider memorizing a short phrase that brings you hope or encouragement or perseverance. So I'm going to cover three things in this video. Why? And then some examples from a couple people I know or have bumped into. And then finally, things to search for, because these have to be yours. I can't really give you any because then they're not yours. I can tell you what I use, but you've got to do your own search. Why? Well, it's because hard times will happen. All those examples I gave you in the previous video, those were not made up. All those examples and more happened in my small circle of friends. You may be sitting at the hospital bed of your husband after 4 days and wondering not when but if he'll ever wake up. You may be taking your child on flights across the country for repeated treatments and surgeries. And you won't have your daily devotional with you, and you won't have your candle with you. Nature abhors a vacuum, and if you don't have something in your mind, it will be filled with worry and dread and fear. I have a hard doctor appointment coming tomorrow. I was taking a shower today and I'm just cleaning up, and I realize there's a phrase rolling around in my head. I need thee, oh, I need thee. And there's more, but that was it. And it was because I have memorized something that my head was filled with that, rather than worrying about what's coming up. If you fill it with something that inspires hope and endurance, then there will be no vacuum for anxiety and fear to come into. Now, memorized things are not the prayer. They serve to get you into a real prayer. A memorized thing can become the breaker of a worry feedback loop that, oh, what about this, and what about, and what about, and what about, and if you have something memorized that you can back up on, boom, you can break that feedback loop. And then that leaves you open to really say your prayer of genuine and sincere thoughts to your Heavenly Father and your Heavenly Mother. And again, I tell you, I'm using those terms, and maybe to the angels. You talk to whoever you imagine are there. A memorized thing can get you started in your prayer. And it can get you, oh, look, there's a woodpecker on the bird feeder, because my mind wanders a lot. And when I'm looking out the window and after I see that bird on the bird feeder, a memorized piece can get me back into a conversation with God. Now, I'm not suggesting that memorized things should replace your spontaneous conversation with God. No, the spontaneous conversation is the real thing. But there is a phrase in science, and I remember it mainly from chemistry, and it's necessary but not sufficient. A certain chemical in a reaction is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Kind of like to make bread, flour is necessary, but it's not sufficient to make that loaf of bread. And in prayer, memorized phrases can be useful, but not sufficient to a real relationship with God. They can be useful, and that's why I'm encouraging you to consider getting some memorized things. So what kinds of things to memorize? Well, I've memorized phrases from songs that when I sang earlier. And the joy we share as we tear. In that song, it's the chorus. That's in the garden. The chorus is the real magic of that song. I don't have the verses memorized, but the chorus is powerful. I'll put more titles in the description of old songs and newer songs. I was chatting with my friend Diana, and I happened to mention I was going to be making this video, and right away she puts her hand on her necklace and said, "My kids got this for me." And I feel it every time I'm wondering, what do I do? Where do I go here? And it has inscribed on this little thing on her necklace, "I know the plans I have for you." That's not an exact quote, but that's pretty close to what she said. And that phrase gives her hope. It gives her perseverance. It gives her a sense of direction, that she's not lost in the wilderness, that she's walking this with someone else. I was sitting in a hospital waiting room last week. The lady next to me starts talking. Okay, I'll chat with you. Somehow, and she got on the man she was with, and that led her to the death of her husband when she was, 20 years ago, or 25, something, something like that. And she looks at me and says, "No woman wants to be a widow at 45. And it happens. I have a friend who became a widow at 45. And I asked her, "Well, how did you get through that? Do you have any," because I'm working on this video, right? I said, "Do you have any memorized things that help you get through hard times?" And it was an interesting thing she said, because I have these religious songs, and Diana has a Bible phrase. And this lady's comment was, "Long time ago, before giving birth to my 4 kids," she said, 15 minutes. I can get through another 15 minutes. And that's hers, because that gives her endurance. That summons up persistence. That pulls forward out of her unconscious a sense of hope. 15 minutes. I can do this for 15 more minutes. Imagine, she was saying that in her labor of 4 kids. And that's what worked for her. Get something. You won't find that in any book of inspirational sayings, but it worked for her. And it left her feeling not alone. And it gave her encouragement. So I encourage you, find some books of famous quotes, of inspirational quotes. Find some songs. You don't need to memorize the whole song. I just memorized little bits and pieces of songs. Get books, get calendars, those sometimes a rip-off calendar, or those spiral calendars that you can use year after year. Don't memorize all of them. You only want 2 or 3, maybe 4 little phrases that when you are in trouble, you can call upon. Get quotes from the world's religions. You can find those books. So, if my circle of friends is any indication, I'm sorry, but you will have hard times. And you will be crushed physically. Now, when your body suffers pain and your health you can't regain, and your soul is slowly sinking in despair. Yeah, that's the second verse from a song. You'll be crushed emotionally. And you may find that having a ready tool in your back pocket, a memorized phrase, will be very useful at such a time. Not sufficient, but useful to fill up the void and not leave room for worry and fear and anxiety and hopelessness. Memorized phrase can do that for you. So I encourage you to consider searching for a phrase that works for you, that you can pull out when you need it, and that it will prove helpful for you. Now I'm sitting back kind of like, well, that's the end of my series. And then I realized, there's one more thing I'd like to tell those folks. So I have one more series in my encouragement series, and that title is going to be Chase the Goal. We'll work on that later. Bye-bye.